We've now travelled the length and breadth of the UK on our journey of discovery around the entire coastline. So far, we've visited our southern, western and northern shores, looking at how the coast has shaped us as a nation. Now, for the first time, we're heading down the east coast. And we're beginning at the northeastern corner of the British mainland, the famous Scottish landmark of John O'Groats. Many years ago, I cycled here all the way from Land's End, and if you're thinking of doing the same thing yourself, I must warn you that the last stretch along the northeast coast of Scotland has a real sting in the tail. It's a killer. And yet my bike ride was nothing compared to the extraordinary lengths that the people who live on this coast have gone to just to make a living. It's that industry and ingenuity that I'll be exploring in the company of our team of experts. Neil Oliver gets a taste of life at sea during one of the most troubled times in the fishing industry's history. Alice Roberts meets Britain's last whalers. Miranda Krestovnikov has a front row seat as our most northerly dolphins do a spot of salmon fishing. Mark Horton uncovers the origins of an invention that helped turn the tide of the Second World War. And I'll be investigating the future of North Sea oil. This is the story of Coast. On this leg of the journey, we'll be travelling over 500 miles from John O'Groats right down to North Queensferry in the Firth of Forth. Fishing has been the mainstay of communities on the east coast for centuries. In the 1800s, there were over 100 fishing ports along here. Today, there are still 50 working harbours. The trouble is, because there's little protection from the wilds of the North Sea, it's very difficult to land boats. But up here in the northeast, they've always been an enterprising lot. The Walligo steps zigzag their way up the sheer cliff face. This gigantic staircase was built for carrying fish from the harbour below. They're a monumental testament to the people who lived here. There were fish out there, and they were going to land them, whatever it took. There were steps here as early as the 1600s. But the 365-step sweep that we see today was completed in 1792. Walligo was mainly used to land herring. At its peak in 1855, there were 35 boats operating out of this tiny port. We look at this place today and it's dramatic, it's scenic, but in those days it would have been horribly intimidating. It's a very narrow, rocky entrance. And if you imagine you're in a boat heavily loaded with fish on a big swell and an onshore wind, and you misjudge your approach, you'll be smashed to smithereens. Despite the dangers, in the 1860s, Walligo Harbour was thriving. The North Sea teemed with the affectionately known silver darlings. They were landing over 2,000 barrels of herring a year at Walligo, and the whole catch had to be laboriously carried, basket by basket, up the cliff. It wasn't the fishermen who did the carrying, it was the women. The women were the backbone of the industry, mending the nets and gutting up to 60 fish a minute. And to stop the men getting wet and catching hypothermia, they'd carry them out to the boats. You only have to climb these steps to get a feel for how hard life must have been for those women carrying baskets of fish up the cliff, often in the winter, when the steps would have been slippery with rain and the air would have been freezing cold. Looked at from the comfort of the 21st century, their lives look unimaginably tough. Today's East Coasters aren't scared of hard work either. There are salmon fishermen along here who still embrace traditional methods, hauling in nets by hand. But they've got competition. The UK's most northerly population of dolphins, who are also partial to this prized fish. Miranda Krestofnikov is at the Moray Firth with the salmon hunters.
This great expanse of water is a truly extraordinary place that really comes alive during the summer months. The bottlenose dolphins and fishermen await the annual run of Atlantic salmon returning from the sea to breed in Scottish rivers. Seven generations of Sandy Patience's family have fished this area.
Better do it that way, Jim, now. Come this way a wee bit,
Yeah?
on that.
Okay.
That's it. There you go, look.
All right.
There, hang the bag. Righto.
Sandy, watching you guys work like this, pulling in the nets, I mean, it's like watching fishing from a bygone era.
It is indeed. This is what they did in biblical times. It's called net and cobble fishing. The net goes around in a semicircle and the rope is paid out and comes back to the beach. And the net is pulled at all times and the whole operation maybe takes about 20 minutes.
It's really full-on work. I mean, it looks very tiring. You're working...
It is indeed very hard work. You can start off, like myself, weighing 13 stone, and by the end of the season, you're down to 11 stone. So you don't need any exercise bike.
That's a beauty.
Yes.
How big is that one?
About 6 pounds.
It's lovely.
Travelled all the way from north side of Greenland.
Sandy and his team catch an average of only 50 fish a week, but a single dolphin can eat up to 10 salmon per day.
Do you ever feel like you're in competition with dolphins, or they're in competition with you?
No, not really. Sometimes the dolphins will not be to my benefit because they might chase a shoal of fish around towards the net. We've all to make a living. The dolphins have to live just the same as I, so I haven't a problem with that.
I've caught just the odd glimpse or two of dolphins this morning, just in the distance while I've been fishing here with Sandy, but this isn't really the best place to see them. Just over there is a little spit of land, and that's the best place to watch dolphins from the shore in the whole of Britain.
The dolphins congregate here at Chanonry Point because it's the perfect place to catch dinner. It's one of the most dangerous parts of the salmon's epic journey back to their spawning rivers. As they swim past, the tide pushes them against the shore. It offers rich pickings for the dolphins and means that we get to see them in action. I've met up with dolphin expert Helen Bailey.
Oh, look, there's a dolphin.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
They're a long, long way away, but you can really clearly see what they're doing, though.
Yeah.
That's terrific, though. All that energy and excitement at the surface. I mean, even from this distance, you can gauge just how big they are. I never get over how huge the bottlenose dolphins in this country are.
They are really big. The dolphins here can be up to 4 meters long. But it makes sense in this area. We've got quite cold water and they need a big body. They have small fins, thick blubber layer. They're really designed to generate heat and to minimise the loss.
Oh, they've changed direction.
Yeah.
And they're coming in really close. They've moved so fast. They're coming towards us. That's fantastic. I've heard that dolphins can eat, is it 10% of their body weight a day? So if you've got a 300-kilo dolphin, that's 30 kilos of fish. That's quite a lot of salmon, isn't it?
Absolutely. So they'll be spending a lot of their time trying to feed.
Superb! I've never seen that before.
Well, the salmon are a very large, fast-swimming fish, so it could be that during the pursuit, the dolphins are trying to catch the fish and they just break the surface and we see the fish being thrown.
Oh, there's two there. Fantastic.
Once they've had a good feed, the dolphins just seem to have fun, playing with each other and reinforcing their social bonds. This really is the ultimate hotspot in the UK to see one of nature's great floor shows.
From Chanonry Point, we wind our way along the Moray coast. This is the mouth of the Spey, one of Scotland's great rivers. It's best known today for salmon fishing, and its water is the magic ingredient in some of the country's finest whiskies. But this peaceful river was once a hive of industry. The Spey was a logging river, rather similar to the ones in the Canadian Rockies. The trees were felled in the forests and mountains way inland, and then when the river was in flood, the logs were floated downstream to be used as raw material in the shipbuilding industry. That bank of the river was once lined with shipyards. Between 1785 and 1890, over 500 beautifully crafted wooden ships were built on the banks of the River Spey. The best known were the tea clippers, built all along this stretch of coast in ports like Kingston and Aberdeen. The pride of the East Coast was the Thermopylae, once the fastest ship in the world. In 1872, she took on the Cutty Sark, raced her from Shanghai to London, and beat her by an impressive margin of 7 days. Steam and steel killed off the wooden ship. It's a story we've seen all the way around the UK coast of historic industries succumbing to modern technology. But further down this coast, there are a couple of pockets of resistance. The port of Macduff is home to the last boatyard in the whole of the UK that can build commercial wooden ships. 90% of the work in the yard is for the fishing industry. Although there's been a big shift over to steel, wooden boats remain popular. So I've been looking around this yard. You've got quite a few wooden boats standing around here being worked on. And that's wooden. That's a wooden one?
That's a wooden one as well, Mike. That's right.
And that one up there?
Yeah. Everything on the slipway here today, they're all wooden boats.
That's interesting. Not a single steel boat here at all, is there?
No.
John Watt is managing director of the shipyard. Why would somebody choose a wooden boat over a steel one?
I suppose it's really been tradition here, and some skippers, they've always had wooden boats. Their families always had wooden boats. They've maybe built 5 or 6 wooden boats. It's a nice material to build a boat. It doesn't rust. And the wooden boats that we built here are very, very strong ships. I mean, they'll last a long time.
Can you still get the shipbuilders who can work in wood?
Well, I've got to admit that's a bit difficult getting experienced people, and as you know, there's really a serious skill shortage in all trades throughout the country. I mean, we take on apprentices each year. We take on 6 to 8 apprentices each year. Currently, we've got 20 apprentices going through the company, and 6 of them are being trained on timber boats.
So you're still training young Scots to work in boats, to build boats?
They don't have to be Scots, though.
We've now reached the heart of Scotland's biggest fishing region. Scotland is still one of the largest fishing nations in Europe. The fleet lands 2/3 of the total UK volume of fish. But quotas imposed by Europe, cutting the amount of fish they're allowed to catch, have made recent years some of the most turbulent the industry has ever faced. Neil Oliver has gone to see how one particular community is coping.
Fishing has been the main way of life in Fraserburgh for over 200 years. Today, out of a population of 13,000, over half work in fishing-related jobs.
In recent years, the Fraserburgh fleet's been cut in half, and the whitefish fleet catching haddock and cod has borne the brunt of it. It's all been done in the name of conserving the fish stocks, and decommissioning boats has been the government's solution to the problem.
Sandy West and his two sons used to own a fishing trawler.
Sandy!
But the boat was decommissioned, scrapped 18 months ago.
Yeah, show me what's going on.
In October 2003, the family made the last trip with the boat, the Steadfast 4, to a scrapyard in Denmark.
It's not so much as the end of a dream, it's the end of a part of my life. It's the end of a big part of my life. We'll just have to get over it. It was so final at the time to see the ship go. More than so, because that ship was actually built for the future of my two sons.
49 white fish boats have been destroyed in Fraserburgh over the last 4 years. Today, there are only 10 left. Decommissioning started because cod and haddock stocks were at dangerously low levels. The European Union imposed quotas, but they were driving fishermen to the verge of bankruptcy. Many skippers, like Sandy, felt they had no choice but to take up the government's offer of compensation to scrap their boats.
And what do you think now, nearly 2 years down the line, about the decommissioning?
Well, it's been bad for the town because almost all the whitefish fleet is going from this town. But on the other hand, the sea is starting to replenish itself of fish. But what's going to happen is we're going to get a higher fleet to catch these fish. The biggest fear here is if the foreign fleets come into our waters and catch these fish in our waters, there'll be abundance of stocks. That's what's going to happen.
How does it make you feel, that prospect?
It makes you feel good, doesn't it? Really.
Sandy had little of his compensation money left after he'd paid off the costs of the boat. He now works as a hired skipper in Ireland. After their boat was decommissioned, Sandy's son Xander spent a year in the oil industry, but now he's back working as a deckhand on a prawn boat.
Is she back on the boats now?
Unfortunately, aye.
Lead on.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to turn my back on the fishing completely and get into something else. The pull was too strong. I think you've just got it in the blood. And I've got it in my blood, unfortunately. It's a curse, maybe I didn't can, but I just had to come back and get one more spin.
I'm joining Xander to try and understand what lured him back.
Right out, boys, away the haul. We'll get out.
Wiggy, Neil. Time to haul in it. It's time to go.
That was dreadful. I don't mind telling you. It's just constant noise. It's like being in a tumble dryer or something. And it smells real bad.
The working routine involves shooting and hauling the nets, sorting out the catch, and grabbing a couple of hours sleep before it's time to start again. These guys can be working 20 out of every 24 hours.
So is this just a typical morning then? This is how it starts?
That's how it starts, that's how it ends, that's how it always ends.
Right. I know you've seen all this 1,000 times before, but it's exciting for somebody like me that's never seen it.
There are now 70 prawn boats working out of Fraserburgh. Quotas on prawns are more generous, so whitefish boats that could convert moved over. It's become the biggest shellfish port in Europe. But for Xander, who'd been training to be a skipper on his dad's boat, the Steadfast, it's not the future he had planned.
What are you doing there, exactly?
Just sorting them out, really. Keeping out a bigger size in one basket, a slightly smaller size in another basket. You imagine standing here 3-4 hours doing this. Again, we couldn't exactly turn around and cut a job of the year, could When I was on at Steadfast, I swore that I would never ever go aboard a prawn boat. I left the Steadfast, the wife said, "But you got a day." I says, "I'll make care as long as it's not on a prawn boat." I says, "There's no way you're ever got to get me in a prawn boat." A year later, on a prawn boat.
What was it about the Steadfast then that made the difference?
I think the simple way to put it is, there's a big difference between chasing cod and chasing a prawn. The chasing cod and fish, I think it's just really exciting.
Was it more like hunting when it was cod?
Yeah. Yeah.
The EU accept they should have tackled overfishing earlier. When they eventually did, the measures they took were extreme. But many Scottish fishermen feel they've been hit harder than others. While their boats were decommissioned, Irish and Spanish fishermen got grants to build new ones. For Xander, the loss of the family boat has been devastating.
It's really hard to explain who you feel when your life's taken it off of you, because that's what it is. Steadfast was a boat, but it was also something that had been in my family for years. It put food on our table for years. It wasn't just a job. It was kind of, I think, revolved around about it. And all of a sudden, that's taken it off of you. Where do you go for here? What job do you do? You've got his family. How do I support them? Why take somebody with ambition and knock it out of them?
It's clear that both the fishing industry and the fish stocks are fragile. There's a delicate balance to be struck to ensure that we don't lose either one. As the scientists and politicians fight it out, the fishing families of Fraserburgh pay the price.
From here, it's south all the way as we turn the corner at Fraserburgh. Luckily for all of us, the North Sea has provided more than just fish. Beneath the waves lurks another bonanza. One that has transformed not just the economic fortunes of this area, but the whole UK. This beautiful beach at Cruden Bay is concealing a surprise. Rushing beneath my feet at a rate of 2.5 million gallons a day is oil. The oil from nearly 50 platforms, sighted up to 200 miles offshore, is passing through a single umbilical cord right here, known as the Forties pipeline. The oil industry has had a profound effect on this stretch of coastline and on the UK as a whole. But what does the future hold for North Sea oil? The Forties pipeline system took 20,000 people 3 years to construct. Built in the early 1970s, it was a massive undertaking in the same era and on the same scale as the space race. Today, it carries nearly half our entire oil supply, direct from beneath one of the harshest sea environments in the world. But incredibly, the discovery of North Sea oil nearly didn't happen. It was a find of natural gas off the coast of the Netherlands that triggered a gigantic gamble. Companies staked tens of millions of pounds on a hunch that the Scottish waters might be hiding the far bigger prize of oil. One of those early oil prospectors was Rob Lingard. From the late 1960s, he worked as a drilling deckhand on board BP's Sequest exploration rig. Pleasure to meet you. I like the hat. You look the part. Should we go aboard?
Yep.
Is that an authentic oilman's hat from one of your travels?
I've had this 30 odd years.
Have you?
Hat, a long, long while.
Did you see yourselves as explorers?
Very much so, because we used to try all this new equipment and we used to smash no end of gear. But it was pioneering days, and the things we used to do then you would never get away with nowadays, I'm afraid.
And was it all just a big adventure, or did you think we were really making history here?
Well, to me it was a big adventure at the time.
BP had been searching beneath the seabed for 5 years, but had found nothing. Their exploration license was about to run out, and the company's future was in jeopardy. By the 11th of October 1970, it was reaching make or break time.
I was working on the rig floor, and lo and behold, there was oil floating about on top of the mud. And I thought, first thought, rotary table leaking, because we'd had trouble with it earlier on.
You thought the oil had come from faulty machinery?
Yes, we did, yeah. We stopped. I thought, oh, go down and get a sample, get the geologist out of bed, drill a little bit more. Geologists going mental. Everybody's on the telex machine, coded messages.
Why coded messages?
Well, we don't want the world to know what's happening out there. There's a big investment. And we knew we'd got oil, but we didn't quite realise at the time how big it was.
In actual fact, you were sitting on top of the Forties field and you changed economic history for Britain.
Exactly, certainly Aberdeen.
Yeah.
And if I'd known then what I know now, I'd have gone home and remortgaged my house and bought a lot of small shares.
And it didn't just change the economy, it changed the whole way the coast behaved, the way that it looked, the jobs, the economy, all the local economies.
I mean, you just got to look at Invergordon where we are today. I mean, there was nothing here except bird spotting at one time.
Forties was the first giant oil field to be discovered in UK waters. Soon, other big fields came on stream: Piper, Brent, Ninian. North Sea oil had truly taken off. The provincial fishing port of Aberdeen became the Dallas of the North, Europe's oil capital. The oil and the revenues, £200 billion to date, have flowed ever since. But for the first time since the discovery of the big oil fields, UK oil production has begun to decline. Britain will soon be a net importer of oil. The problem is not that there isn't any left, but that what remains is becoming increasingly difficult to extract. I'm on my way to one of the new age oil platforms. With the end of North Sea oil and gas in sight, companies are having to find cleverer ways of exploiting what's left. The Elgin-Franklin platform, 150 miles out to sea, is at the cutting edge of extracting oil that would have been completely inaccessible 30 years ago. They're tapping the deepest reserves anywhere in the North Sea. David Atkins is manager of the Elgin-Franklin platform. How does Elgin differ from the fields found in the early days?
The main difference right now for Elgin is that we're drilling a lot deeper than we did in the early days, and we're drilling a lot further. Here, we've got a rig which has come up against the platform to drill a new well for us. And this well is actually over 5,000 meters deep.
That's about 3 miles.
Yeah, it's over 3 miles deep. We're drilling down, and then we fan out, we move out. Techniques have moved on in 30 years. It's called directional drilling, and we can drill practically in any direction we want to go. We can do loops, we can do spirals. It's absolutely amazing what the drillers can do. It's a very powerful technique that they've got now. And originally, 20 years ago, we only expected to produce 20, 30, maximum 40% of the oil in the reservoir. That means that 60% of the oil is still left there in the ground. What we're trying to do is try and work out techniques to get that extra oil out. Getting 1 or 2% oil from one of the large fields today is the equivalent of a new find, a new discovery in the North Sea. Right, Nick, we're just going to go across to the wellhead platform. This is where the wells are, where the wells are drilled from.
Feels rather as if we're walking through an underground tunnel on the London Underground network rather than balanced 100 feet above the open sea. New techniques mean that they can carry on pumping oil out of the North Sea for at least another 30 years. But the boom time has passed, and ultimately, the reserves will run out. Are there any elements of this huge oil industry out here in the North Sea that can somehow be recycled as other forms of energy generation?
Aberdeen is a centre of excellence in the oil industry worldwide. It's recognised everywhere. So what we hope at the end of the day is maybe the oil platforms will go, maybe the rigs will go, but the technique, the industry, the skills that we've set up here in the North Sea will actually last for a long, long time.
It's not all big business and heavy engineering around here. But the same sense of enterprise that led to the success of the oil industry, the impulse to make the most of whatever nature has to offer, has seen a more modest harvest of the sea.
My name is Margaret Horn, and I have a restaurant in Missy Village, and I'm down on the shore picking up seaweed like generations of Missy fisherwomen before me. I come down here as much as I can to get stuff for the restaurant. This is dulse. This is one of my favourite, very, very favourites. You eat it like this, or you can roast it with our favourite way was with a red hot poker from the fire, which splutters and sizzles and turns bright green. Sprinkle it with vinegar, absolutely delicious. This is what I've been looking for to show you. This is tangles. Now this end of the tangle is what my mum would snap off and give me to eat and say, enjoy that, it's just like rock but much better for you. Stick of rock. Okay, oh, this is the pool I've been looking for. The tide's going to come in and overwhelm us, but never mind, we'll be able to see the growth of this wavy one that we called sloke. It's like the Japanese nori, and people pay a fortune for Japanese seaweeds, and it's growing just on our own shores. They just know where to look. Going to be swept away. Now I'll just take this up, give it a good wash, and then it'll be on the menu tonight, if I leave any.
For centuries, intrepid traders from the east coast have exported their wares around the world. From grain to Scandinavia, through to granite to New Zealand. But just 12 miles offshore, there's a treacherous barrier to sea trade. Bell Rock, a deadly reef notorious for shipwrecks. By the late 1700s, Bell Rock was claiming an average of 6 ships a year. When HMS York sank in 1804 with a loss of 491 men, the tragedy finally triggered action. And this is the result. Bell Rock Lighthouse, defiantly sticking out of the ocean. It took over 100 men 4 years to build it in appalling conditions. The challenge of building a lighthouse in the middle of the sea fell to the brilliant engineer Robert Stevenson, who went on to construct over 20 Scottish lighthouses. We'll take a closer look at Bell Rock. The 100-foot-high lighthouse is precariously perched, ingeniously designed so that its weight alone holds it onto the rock. Now we're up close, I can see why Stevenson was commissioned to build a lighthouse on top of this ferocious reef. It's actually a ridge of serrated sandstone that forms the top of a gigantic submerged mountain which disappears just below the surface of the water every high tide, so you can't even see it. It's absolutely lethal. The lighthouse has been doing its bit to keep sailors safe since 1811. So precise is its construction that the stonework hasn't required any maintenance in nearly 200 years. But for one East Coast community, overcoming the obstacle of Bell Rock was just the start of their epic voyages to some of the most inhospitable parts of the globe. Alice Roberts is in Dundee, a place which likes to bill itself as the city of discovery.
The discovery in the slogan is this ship. Built in 1900, she took two of the world's most celebrated explorers, Captain Robert Falcon Scott and Ernest Shackleton, on their very first expedition to the Antarctic.
In Scott and Shackleton's time, Dundee led the world in building ships that could withstand extreme polar conditions. And the famous explorers' expedition relied on the strength of the Dundee-built vessel. The Discovery was trapped in the Antarctic ice for nearly 2 years and survived.
But Dundee's shipbuilding expertise didn't come from exploration, but from a much less glamorous enterprise. The city was once one of the world's major whaling ports.
Dundee whaling crews had been sailing to the polar regions for over 150 years before the Discovery's expedition. The hunt for the great beasts of the sea took them further north than anyone had been before. They ventured through the ice and uncharted waters of the Arctic, searching for Greenland right whales. Historian David Henderson is an expert on Dundee's whaling past.
Hi Alice.
Hello David.
Welcome to Discovery.
Hello, she's beautiful.
Lovely ship.
A wonderful ship.
Magnificent ship. Mind your ankles on the portholes. The portholes are on the deck in Discovery, not on the side.
Why?
To keep the strength of the hull.
Right.
When she was built to barge through ice, they didn't want any points of weakness.
It seems really strange to think of Britain as a whaling nation, because obviously we're not anymore. It just seems very odd to think about it being such a key thing, and particularly here in Dundee.
Yes, Dundee was like many of the East Coast ports. The government offers a subsidy and everybody jumps in and goes whaling. And this happened in Dundee about 1750.
Right.
It was fraught with difficulty. On occasions, Dundee ships were trapped in the ice for months. One year, 19 ships were lost. 21 came back without a catch. Things were that bad.
What were they actually bringing back? What were the main products that they were bringing back?
The main one, of course, was blubber, which contained the oil. The other product was a material called whalebone, which are the baleen plates that hang down inside the whale's mouth instead of teeth. And these plates are very, very flexible, and they're what made your granny's corsets.
Yes.
And that was a very, very valuable commodity.
So it was big business then?
Oh, very big business in Dundee. Simply, it was the best job around. It was better than sailing to the Indies and getting standard pay, because at the end of a whaling voyage, providing they got a catch, they were in the money when they came off the ship.
It was in the 1860s that Dundee's whaling industry really took off. Other whaling ports were struggling as paraffin began to replace whale oil for lighting. But the Dundee whalers had a new market right on their doorstep. The city's vast jute industry needed whale oil for processing the cloth. It was an industrial match made in heaven. Dundee's whalers were the first to invest in steamships and became a major force in the whaling industry. But they were victims of their own success.
By the time Dundee was a key whaling port, the whales that they were searching were becoming very scarce, and they were having to sail further and further north into uncharted waters to find their prey, and it became a very, very risky business indeed.
By 1900, the Arctic whales had been hunted almost to extinction. In an effort to save their industry, the whalers had to look even further afield. Their search took them south to the oceans of the Antarctic. Whaling from Scotland continued right up till the 1960s. Don Lennie and George Cummings were Antarctic whalers.
Hello.
Yes, this is George.
Hello, George. What exactly are we looking at? They look fairly nasty.
Very nasty tools, yes, as far as the whale's concerned.
Yeah. This looks like a pretty old instrument here. Is that the sort of harpoon which would have been used by the Dundee whalers in the 19th century?
Well, certainly, yes. But this would be a handheld one with a pole.
Right.
You see, and you come up, throw it into the whale, withdraw the handle,
Yeah.
and of course the line is attached.
This thing on the end, I mean, is that still a harpoon?
That is one large harpoon.
Yeah.
That's a modern one.
enormous.
That's a more modern harpoon.
Right. So it's just
once
like a
that went in the
warhead.
whale, and once it was inside the whale, it exploded, and hopefully that killed the whale. In
Right.
lots of cases it did, but in other cases it didn't.
So George, you were there on the factory ship,
Yep.
taking in the whales as they come in.
Yep.
It sounds like it must have been a pretty horrendous job.
Yes, it was. I mean, really, it was like a very, very large open-air abattoir in freezing conditions.
Yeah.
That's basically what modern whaling's about, actually. If you were below decks in the factory ship, the temperature can be up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Probably the best description I'll give you is almost Dante's Inferno. It was an extremely hostile environment to work in, but it was a job you'd taken on, you just had to get on with it.
Don and George were on the very last whaling mission launched from Britain in 1962. Over 40 years on, they now have mixed feelings about the industry.
At that time, and even in the 60s, the early 60s, there was no sort of conservation lobby as such. Really, we didn't think an awful lot about it. We were obviously sorry that you had to kill the whales. I mean, it was not a thing that you took pleasure out of, but a lot of the men were there just to earn a good living. My opinion has changed now. I mean, I'm sorry it happened, obviously. Like anything else, you're clever in hindsight. Britain was a major whaling nation, and it's something I'm afraid we cannot hide. We can't sweep it under the carpet. It's part of our history.
It was a job of work. I mean, it was an industry. It was a job of work like any other job, and you tried not to think about the sad part of it, which was the killing of the whales. And let's face it was sad, but they're such magnificent creatures that they really are, and it's really sad to see them suffering like that, because they did suffer. And if whales could have made a noise, we wouldn't have been here. You know, if a whale could have screamed or shrieked or whatever, you wouldn't be able to bear it. You wouldn't.
International commercial whaling was suspended in 1986, but Norway continues to hunt them commercially, and Iceland and Japan award themselves whaling quotas for scientific research. Over 1,000 whales are killed each year, and many species are still endangered.
The thought of Britain ever being a whaling nation makes me feel uncomfortable. But it was the pioneering spirit of the whaling expeditions that set out from ports like Dundee that helped drive the exploration of the Antarctic. We can still admire the resilience and resourcefulness of those men who made their living in one of the most inhospitable environments on the planet.
We're off to the windswept shores of Fife. This is a popular spot for sports of all kinds. And it was the grassy dunes of St Andrews that inspired a game that's become one of Scotland's most famous exports. In 1457, James II of Scotland banned his subjects from playing the newly invented game of golf. Obsession with the sport was distracting the Scots from their war with the English. Now that distraction has become a global industry. St Andrews is proud of its title as the home of golf. It has 6 courses, and despite the Scottish weather, golfers from around the world come to play here. At £115 a round on the old course, St Andrews is a big contributor to the £300 million a year that Scotland earns from golf. The superintendent of the old course is Gordon Moyer. Do you know how it started?
Originally, I think Dutch and Flemish fishermen arrived at the port here and then played their way along the beach into town as they were coming into town. Then the local shepherds and the courses sort of picked up and developed and adapted that game to something like golf.
But where did they get the idea of hitting little white balls with long thin sticks?
Well, probably pebbles with crooks. The shepherds were using their crooks and hitting some pebbles along the links land here.
And what does links mean?
Links really is the land between the sea and the arable inland land. It's too infertile for farming, possibly just a bit of sheep grazing.
So golf couldn't have evolved on any other part of the landscape other than this link area between the seashore and the farmland. It's a coastal sport.
Yeah, initially it started off as a coastal sport, and then of course it developed and everybody wanted to play golf, so it became more common to build golf courses inland.
I'm amazed that we're allowed to walk around so casually on such hallowed turf, Gordon.
Well, all the golf courses at St Andrews technically belong to the people of the town, and they have, it's common land.
So anybody can come and have a picnic here?
You can come and have a picnic. The town people actually have the right to go and hang their washing out to dry here on a Sunday, which probably started from fishermen having the right to lie out their nets and mend and dry their nets.
And do you come across many strings of laundry on the golf course?
Fortunately, not really, no.
It's strange to think that a coastal wasteland became the bunkers and roughs that golfers know all too well. This corner of the Scots coast is now replicated the world over. The landscape may be ideal for golf, but during the Second World War, it was also identified by Hitler as a potential spot for attack. The huge beaches meant that it was perfect for landing troops, armoured vehicles and planes. An invasion here could have cut the country in half and opened up a new northern front. Winston Churchill's response inadvertently led to one of the greatest unsung inventions of the Second World War. With British forces fully occupied abroad, this stretch of coast was put under the protection of exiled Polish forces. The anti-tank blocks strung along these beaches are a visible reminder of the Polish efforts. The invasion never materialised, but as Mark Horton is investigating, the Poles put their time here to good use.
One of the Polish officers sent to defend the Fife coast designed a machine that was to save countless lives in war zones around the world. It is one of the most important inventions of the Second World War, the mine detector.
Lech Muzinski was part of the exiled Polish army based in Fife. He trained with the Polish mine-clearing sappers using the original mine detector developed on this very beach.
Must be the famous mine detector.
It is, yes.
What a wonderful piece of kit. Does this actually date from the Second World War?
Yes, that was one of the first units that were produced by the British Army for the Allied armies.
Before these things were invented, yes, how did people look for mines?
Well, they had steel spikes, and they had to walk along the beach or fields and spike the ground. And if you felt a hard object, you had to feel it with your fingers to see if it was a mine or something else. And you had to gently remove it. It was an extremely dangerous job.
It was in the Second World War that mines became a major weapon. Huge numbers were buried around our coast to prevent enemy landings. But they were laid in haste, and the poor records of their locations made them dangerous to our own troops. Polish officer Lieutenant Joseph Stanisław Kozacki had already been toying with an idea for detecting mines back in Poland. The British War Office asked him to develop his designs during his posting in Fife.
Do you think after all these years it still actually works? Can we have a go?
Well, I've got a bunch of keys here. I'll go and hide them.
Well, I shall look away.
I've got...
You've hidden them then?
Yes, I have.
Well, so what do I do?
Just walk with it. We're about, that's right, 2 or 3 inches above the sun. Slightly slower sweeps. Short steps forward, that's it.
I can hear this continuous tone the whole time.
Yes. If you come across a metal object, it'll change.
Oh, hang on. It's sort of fluctuating like mad. Must be...
That's right, that's
it. Isn't it? Look, keys.
Yes.
The mine detector came into its own during the North African campaign. German troops had protected themselves with extensive minefields. 500 of Kozacki's mine detectors were urgently deployed. The Allied forces punched through the enemy minefields, and their victory at the Battle of Al Alamein in 1942 was one of the pivotal moments of the Second World War.
Far more than is generally realized, the mine detector has played a great part in flinging the Axis out of Africa. Rommel brilliantly employed the landmine, and it was necessary to find a quick and safe detector. What the anti-mine device achieved can be judged by the fact that this is a typical day's haul. Now hear what Sergeant Millard has to say.
I've been fighting in the desert with General Wavell and with General Montgomery. My job out there was to clear mines and make gaps for our tanks to get through. And every 40 men I used to take out of my section, I knew it was certain that I'd lose 10 either blown up or killed. Now we have these new detectors, we are pretty certain that we won't get many casualties.
So how do you rank the importance of this as an invention?
Well, as an invention, I rank it very, very highly. And this is the detector that was used very extensively, everywhere, all over the world, to the last conflict in Iraq.
But nobody's ever heard of Lieutenant Kozacki. He has been forgotten about completely.
He has, partly due to the fact that this invention was a top secret during the war. And after the war, people wanted peace. They didn't want to talk about war, inventions and things like that. It was a great invention of the last century, not appreciated enough. It saved countless thousands and thousands and thousands of lives.
Joseph Kozacki's invention was never patented, and he received no money for it. His only reward for the ingenious mine detector that helped clear our beaches and battlefields around the world was a letter from King George VI and a Polish Silver Cross medal.
We're nearing the end of our journey down the industrious east coast of Scotland. It's fitting that our route south takes us across one of the most enduring symbols of engineering achievement in the UK. No landmark sums up the pioneering spirit of the east coast of Scotland better than this. The Forth Rail Bridge. One of the greatest wonders of the industrial world, the bridge endures as a symbol of what man can achieve when pushed beyond the normal limits. The world's first major steel bridge is 360 feet high and 1.5 miles long. It took 5,000 men 7 years to build. As many as 80 lives were lost during its construction. Workers on the bridge could be as young as 10 years old. The youngest recorded death was a 13-year-old who fell from a great height and who died at the feet of his father. There are calls now for a memorial to be erected to those who died, but for the time being, this bridge itself is a testament to the engineers, to the workers who risked their lives to build it. This bridge, for the elegance of its engineering, for the raw strength with which it strides across this enormous gulf. It's a stunning memorial to the endeavour that we've seen along the whole of this coast. What a way to end our tour of the enterprising east coast of Scotland. We're heading for the English border and Berwick upon Tweed. On the Northumbrian coast, we rebuild Britain's first house, 5,000 years older than the pyramids. We explore the spiritual Isle of Lindisfarne and meet one of the coast's great survivors. Further south, where coal was king, I investigate how shipbuilding has given way to shipbreaking. Industry and isolation, a coast of two halves, the northeast of England.